innocent Jews. Trust me, that's not private. That's public. And Mayor Mondani, hear this clearly. When terror is excused, silence isn't neutrality. It's complicity. And that's the real story.
That's absolutely right. I mean, can you imagine if you were married to someone that supported acts of terrorism, genocide, actual genocide against a group of people, indiscriminately killing civilians left, right, and centre? and then on top of that, you're a public figure as well. You have a duty to provide moral clarity if you're going to be a significant person. Let's just think through a few of the factors. First of all, a mayor's spouse may have private influence over the mayor's thinking and decisions, and if the spouse supports something extreme, we have every right to ask whether that could affect the mayor's views or policies.
God. Well, the mayor's views have been crystal clear that he does support terror.
Spouses of major officials often take part in public events as well, and charities and campaigns, advisory roles. So if someone is in that position and supports violent groups, the public may feel that it reflects on the leadership of the mayor. Rightly, they would think that. Also, voters often judge leaders partly by the people closest to them, and if those close to a leader hold extreme views, people have the right to question the leader's judgment or values. And also, this is a security issue.
Exactly.
Because if the issue involves support for terrorism...
Exactly. This is a city that suffered the worst jihadist attack in history of the United States, 9/11, and the wife of the mayor supports terror? That is unbelievable.
New Yorkers should have the right to worry about the potential risk or sympathies around someone connected to political power. Of course, the truth of the matter is that what Hamas did on October 7th, when people try to say, you can support the Palestinian cause, but not... The truth is, that is what the Palestinian cause
exactly
is about. It is about eradicating the Jewish people.
Exactly. The Palestinian became Palestinians in 1964 by Yasser Arafat, a mass murderer. And we know what the peace agreement with him led to the worst terror attacks Israel has ever endured. He targeted civilians only. It would have been maybe if you target military, but he targeted specifically civilians in order to, this is what terror does. They target people that have nothing to do with politics or military, and this is what distinguishes terrorists from people from countries that have a military with laws and rules. And this is what is happening in Iran too. They have a terror regime that targets civilians everywhere.
People's right to self-determination, to a home of their own, to live in freedom. That's what it's always been about. And they try to frame it as, no, we're just trying to correct an injustice. Well, what justice were you trying to correct in the 1920s massacres of Jews inside of British Mandate Palestine, or in the 1930s?
And why aren't the Iranian children mentioned? But the children of Gaza make headlines when the responsibility of children is due to their parents. And if their parents place them in places where they send rockets on their neighbor, knowing what the consequences will be, not placing them in bomb shelters even, then what do you say about parents like these? Contrary to the parents of Iranian children who are, well, you can only give them responsibility that they're not doing a revolutionary, but they are. They're sacrificing their lives and they're being killed. And yet the media, they don't make headlines. Iran won't make the headlines as Gaza will. Why? Because hating the Jews is what it's all about. It's not about the love for Palestinians, so-called Palestinians, because they're just Arab nomadic people that came from Syria and Lebanon during the Ottoman and British Empire to work there. And there's very, very small kernel of Arabs that actually has always been there. Because when Mark Twain came to Israel, the land of Israel, and 1800s, he saw there were so few people living in there, so few people, and all of a sudden, a lot of people started to come in after the First World War, and definitely with the Turkish Empire, bringing in workers from around the Ottoman Turkish Empire. So the claim to having roots in Israel is ridiculous. There's no proof whatsoever. In a court of law, you need to have proof. Jewish people have tons of proof. It's called archaeological finds of a civilization being there thousands of years ago. It's called history of Jews being expelled from their land, not one time, but 2 times, in the most horrific ways, and enslaved, and being forced into exile, and even in the exile, being forced from one exile to another, like the Spanish Inquisition, and the way they decided to massacre Jews unless they convert to Christianity, and mass migration of Jews from one place of exile that turned out bad to another. And there's historical artifacts for this. Meanwhile, the Palestinians as a nation, no, there's nothing that distinguishes them from people that live in Lebanon or people who live in Syria or Saudi Arabia. So what makes them a people? 1964. That's when they became a people. Before that, Palestinians were people who lived under British mandate that called the place Palestine in order to, for the same reason the Romans called it Palestine, to disconnect the very strong connection of the Jews to their land. So they named it Palestine, like the Romans did when they expelled the Jews.
Or in the 1830s. No, the cause and the effect is the other way around, my friends.
Exactly.
The displacement did not happen, and then the Arab resistance did.
And who's in danger of genocide? 0.001% of the population or 20% of the population? Just do the numbers game.
The displacement of the Arabs I'm talking about. No, it was the other way around. Israel was recognized by the world alongside an Arab state. And the Arabs said, no, we won't tolerate that. We're going to try and destroy you. And in that war of an attempted annihilation against the Jews, Arabs got displaced.
How many times were they offered a 2-state solution? And not to mention that Jordan is the Palestine, because they have 60% Palestinians. And unfortunately, the British, they put this Bedouin as a king, King Hussein, and made him into royalty. He's a sheikh. What distinguishes him from other Arab leaders of a tribe? Nothing. If anybody should have had a monarchy, it's the Jews, because the Jews had a long line of kings during the biblical times. We know this. Who doesn't know King David? And yet this Jordan became somehow a state that has nothing to do with the Palestinians or the Arabs that live there, and that's ridiculous. And they even massacred them in order to disconnect. They don't want it to be known that Jordan, in fact, should have been the other Arab state adjacent to the Jewish state, but they will never accept it because they don't want anyone else. And it's no wonder the wife of the mayor is Syrian, because in Syria there's big intolerance for minorities like the Druze, and what they do is they massacre the minorities, and then this woman gets to be the first lady of a city that has so much diversity. When I attended school in New York City, there were kids in my class from all over the world. New York is the most ethnically diverse city, I think, in the world, maybe the most. And that this woman who comes from the most intolerant, terror-supporting ideology, she gets to be the first lady. No, I don't think this should be allowed to happen. Anyway, so I don't know where I should close. Maybe Shiva. Shiva's epilepsy is getting better now that the rockets are towards the north, where the Druze people are, by the way, and many others. Peace, light, and love.